We all know history is an important topic to understand and to stop it from repeating, so I'm going to be talking about a current historical marker and an event that should become one in the future. Starting off with our current marker, the Battle of Spring Hill, which was a battle in the Civil War. So for this, we need to take it all the way back to the Civil War as a whole. The beginning of the Civil War had many different causes. The most significant reason was the battle over slavery, with the southern states loving slavery for many different reasons, and the North thinking slavery was very inhumane. The South was upset, not only because of the thought slaves being taken away, but also because the North wasn't returning their slaves, which it was their constitutional right to do so. In the South Carolina Declaration of Secession, 1860, it states, "The Constitution of the United States in its 4th article provides as follows. No person held to service or labor in one state under the laws therefore, escaping into another, shall in consequence of any law or regulation therein be discharged from such service or labor, but shall be delivered upon on claim of the party to whom such service or labor may be due." It also states, "The general government as the common agent passed laws to carry into effect these stipulations of the states. For many years these laws were executed, but an increasing hostility on the part of non-slaveholding states to the institution of slavery has led to a disregard of their obligations, and the laws of the general government have ceased to exist, the objects of the Constitution," showing how unfairly the South was being treated, just because the North didn't like the idea of slaves. Slavery has been around since way before the United States even came to be. We can take it back all the way to the Spaniards. This continued into the new colonies, with the transatlantic slave trade, also called the Middle Passage, a trade from Europe to Africa to the Americas. This was a three-way trade where the colonies would give Europe raw materials, and then Europe would give Africa manufactured goods, which would lead to Africa giving the colonies slaves. These slaves were treated horribly during the Middle Passage. They were shoved into bunks, chained together, and treated inhumanely. We see first-hand accounts of these ideas and a description of the Middle Passage. At last, when the ship were in, it had gotten all her cargo. They made ready with many fearful noises, and we were all put under deck, so that we could not see how they managed the vessel. Another statement from this same passage. The closeness of the place and the heat of the climate added to the number in the ship, which was so crowded that each had scarcely room to turn himself, almost suffocated us. This produced prosperous preparations, so the air soon became unfit for respiration, from a variety of loathsome smells, and brought on a sickness among the slaves, of which many died. Even though they were treating their slaves horribly, since farming was the South's primary source of income, it took slaves for the farms to run smoothly. So they would be taken away, it would ruin a century worth of tradition and way of economy, thus leading to the Civil War. In Abraham Lincoln's second inaugural address, 1865, we see how the Civil War was announced, and Abraham Lincoln's thoughts on it. "The progress of our arms, upon which all else chiefly depends. It is well known to the public as to myself, and it is trusted, reasonably, satisfactory, and encouraging to all, with high hopes of the future. No prediction in regard to it is ventured." He then later on states, "While the inaugural address was being delivered from this place devoted altogether to saving the Union without war, agents were in the city seeking to destroy it without war, seeking to dissolve the Union and divide effects by negotiation. Both parties depreciated war, but one of them would make war rather than let the nation survive, and the other would accept war rather than let it perish. And then the war came." The war had many different battles all over during its time. However, a lot of those battles were fought in Tennessee. Tennessee was one of the most fought over battlegrounds during the Civil War. There was the Battle of Franklin, the Battle of Spring Hill, Battle of Murfreesboro, and so on. Tennessee was a very Confederate state. However, Spring Hill was guarded by a small Union garrison. I wanted to discuss the much overlooked Battle of Spring Hill. It occurred November 29, 1864, and was a Confederate attack. Ultimately, with the Confederacy winning the battle, it wasn't easy. It took 2 different attempts. Taking it back to the beginning of the battle, starting at 3 p.m. on November 29, 1864, General Nathan B. Forrest and Brigadier General James Chalmers led an attack against General George Wanger's division. General James Chalmers thought it would be better to hold off because there were Federal infantries and artilleries and General George Wanger's force. But General Forrest was persistent and aggressive. He ordered Chalmers to drive those fellows off. I think you are mistaken. That is only a small cavalry force. It was instant, and one described it as a dreadful few minutes. Chalmers then went back to Forrest, who stated, "They were in there sure enough, wasn't they?" With this attack being a failure, someone had to go again. This ended up being Patrick Celeburn, who had much more warning, and he ended up winning this battle, claiming a victory for the Confederacy. You may be asking, well, how is this little battle important in American history? Well, even though the Battle of Spring Hill may not be one of the most contributing battles to the Civil War, it still gave the Union an idea of how the Confederacy was going to fight and their game plan. They were making it easier for the Union to know their plan and a strategy of their own. Every battle in the Civil War is an essential look at how our world is today, because without every battle, the world would be a much different place today. Overall, this battle was just one small contribution to the Civil War, but it was very eye-opening to see how many tries it took to conquer one battlefield in the South, especially on their own soil. The main message here is to think bigger of what's around you, and don't get too comfortable. The Union ended up winning the war, but you could see that being foreshadowed by how many attempts and how aggressive the Confederacy was with their battles, while the Union was more planned out. With the Union winning the war, slavery was abolished, and the South had to come up with a different way of supporting their farms. Thus, it changed the world and what we may know it today. The next topic is a bit more sensitive. Since we just finished discussing a previous historical marker, I believe the Columbine shooting would also deserve its own historical marker. This event changed how many people viewed the world. It caused 4 people for the first time to believe that schools and churches were not safe. Just a quick explanation. According to History.com, there were 2 shooters, who I will not name. They first tried to plant a bomb in the school, but once they failed, they opened fire, killing 12 students and 1 teacher and injuring way more than 20. And then shortly turned their guns on themselves. They started outside the high school and shortly moved in. These 50 horrible minutes changed all of history. It caused a chain reaction, and there just kept being more and more school shootings every year, with the most recent being this year, but the number grows every year. With this being the start, how many things have changed, and the effects of this tragedy have been seen years later, I believe it deserves its own historical marker. It could help teach others what happened and maybe create change for future generations. If we look back at how much better the world was before this horrible event occurred, I believe teaching history can help prevent it from repeating itself. Overall, history is a crucial part of our lives, and it teaches us about the past and how to make the world a better place today. That makes historical markers a very significant part of our world.